He makes me say a lot of stuff as he walks slowly up here. All right, my own dear dad, Mr. Mark Armstrong.
He is my son. I got me a good one, didn't I? I am so glad to be here. It looks like the crowd may be a little smaller this year. Probably COVID mandates kept them home. I don't know. I'm just happy as a lark. I get to stay. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not turning myself over to them. I've been abused, not neglected when I wanted to be neglected. They have molested me. And I'm just not in the mood for it. I'll tell you the truth, I really was afraid to go to all the feast sites this year because my attitude is really not the best. I don't mind telling you. I'm sure you get that from my letters. I try to keep a little humor in there because that's all that's left. I mean, if you can't ridicule what's going on, what can you do? I was looking at our feast brochure, and it says that we're having a feast in Australia. Well, we're not having a feast in Australia. I mean, we would be, but we can't because they've outlawed it. People can't go out of their houses. Can you imagine? You can't believe that Australia has turned into a police state. And they're trying to do that to us too. They'd like to turn us into a police state. They'd like to have us ratting each other out if we're seen a block or two from our house. But hey, it's almost like that at the airports. I'm sorry that we can't have a feast in Australia. I talked to Murray, and he's staying home in Tasmania. He's not able to travel. And if you do travel, you might not be able to get home. You don't know what's going to happen. And they've built these quarantine camps. I hate to make a big deal about what's going on in Australia, but it is not good. And people don't have freedom. Whatever you thought, when you watched Crocodile Dundee, he was a one-off. He was the only one of his kind. The rest of them obviously aren't like that. I thought they were, but they're not. They're laying down for it. They are locked down. They are masked. They're muzzled. They're not allowed to go out of their houses, and the police are playing along, unbelievably. This better not happen over here. I don't think it's going to go over very well. I am surprised that everybody has accepted these mandates and all these rules and regulations that are coming out all over the place, state by state. I am shocked that somebody hadn't gotten their face and said, no, we ain't doing that. We're Americons. We're not Canadians. We're not Australians. We're not Brits. We're Americans. And we're not putting up with little Lord Fauntleroys like you. Well, anyway, don't let me get carried away. I'm about to say something I shouldn't. So I didn't bring the magazine because it's not printed yet. But we did have these proofreading copies that were just, printed off the computer. They're just regular paper and whatever. And I'm sorry I don't have it to show you, but I do have the opportunity now to tell you about it. and nobody's seen it yet. So everybody here has heard of the elephant in the room. It's an old standby, kind of a statement or what do you call that? Dr. Ricks should know, shouldn't he? I mean, what is it? Cliche. It's a cliche, the elephant in the room. That means, and you can look it up, it means something that everybody knows, but everybody is afraid to mention or talk about because, it's not good. It might cause some trouble somewhere or other. So we went to illustrate the elephant in the room. There's more than one, but anyway, we just had room for one on the cover. So this elephant is in the room, and he's about to step on the dining room table. He's got a stool already on edge. It's about to go down. There's chandeliers waving around and all over the places. I mean, he is tearing the place up. And it is the elephant in the room. Now, I don't want to tell you what the elephant in the room, because I'm pretty sure everybody in here knows what the elephant in the room is. But anyway, you're just going to have to wait until the magazine gets there. okay? And then you can read it and you'll see that you were right all along. Have you seen this thing? I talked to Murray a couple of days ago. Oh, here comes half the room. Good grief, we just doubled our crowd. How about that? I'm going to give them a minute, if it's all right. So we have known, and I'll tell you, ever since I've been a little boy, the church has been preaching the same thing. And that is that there's going to be a world authority that is going to violate God's laws, that's going to make us do things or, try to make the population do things that are against our will, that are against our religion. They're already making me, I'm fortunate that I don't have to lie down for all these mandates. I don't know if it's good that I'm in such a bad attitude, might not be good. It might not be the best thing to be in such a bad attitude about all this stuff, but I am so cynical because, as I just mentioned, the elephant in the room, they don't know anything about it on the mainstream news, on the news networks. They don't know about the elephant in the room. I mean, he's crashing around. They don't see him. They can't talk about it. No. Everything is the way they portray it to you, and you better not come up with any other ideas because that's how it is. And you better not step out of line, or, somebody with a mask on will come in great authority to give you what for. I'm not in the mood for what for. That's why I'm not flying this year. But I don't want to make too big a deal about it. I mean, Dr. Ricks is going to fly, and Stan's going to fly, and thank goodness they are. And, I'll be happy to. I love going out to Lake Tahoe. It's one of the greatest places on earth as far as I'm concerned. And there's plenty to do and lots of entertainment, some of the most beautiful scenery on earth. But I'm afraid I might not make it. If I go to the Springfield airport, there's liable to be trouble. These little regional hubs, they're some of the worst in the world. I mean, you can go through Dallas or Chicago and pretty well go through unnoticed. You ain't getting through Springfield Airport unnoticed. I went in there one morning and I was early for my flight. There was one of me in 22 blue shirts. And they pulled my Bible out of my briefcase and turned it upside down and shook it. I just gritted my teeth. I wanted to say, what, were you expecting a bomb to fall out? But, I'd have still been there probably if I'd have said that. So you just have to give them a wide berth these days. So the elephant in the room, there's more than one, but there is one in particular that everybody knows and no one will dare talk about. Well, there's a new scandal. And this is pretty amazing. I don't think it's ever happened. We've always expected something to go wrong between us and Europe. And I fear that it has. It's gone horribly wrong. And it's a weird situation. I don't know if you've heard about it or not, but it's big doings. And that is that the French had a contract with the Australians to build submarines, nuclear submarines. And apparently this has been understood and it's been ongoing. Well, somehow during the administration, I don't even know what to call them. I don't know what to say. Whatever it would be, it'd be wrong. I guarantee you that. But somehow, the United States has made some deal with Australia that cuts France out after they thought they had a solid legal contract. And they are none too pleased about it. So would you believe, obviously France helped us in the Revolutionary War, and we might not be here had it not been for their assistance. They have recalled their ambassador from the United States for the first time since the Revolutionary War. They have recalled their ambassador, and I mean, they are smoking mad. I've never seen French officials so spitting mad, and they are furious. This may be, I mean, there are a lot of things about NATO that could come flying apart, and this could be one of them. I mean, they're not messing around. They're ticked, and they're not happy. So NATO could come unglued. And another reason that it might come unglued is probably Pakistan. Now, who thought it was a good idea to admit Pakistan to NATO? I have no idea. Because when we went to Afghanistan, the Taliban fled. You know where they went. They went across the border into Pakistan, where they've been ever since, waiting for us to get tired of the deal in Afghanistan. And as you know, 20 years later, we surrendered. At least that's how it's being portrayed, and that's how the world sees it. The Afghans are over there, the Taliban shooting their mouth off and calling all the shots. And we're running. America's running with its tail between its legs after all these years. And if you think that's not playing out on the world stage, it's playing out on the world stage. And then, well, I don't know what to say or what not to say. I don't want to get as, banned. I've come close. They've already warned me once, so don't want to get too loose. But the church has always believed and thought that NATO would fall apart and that a European power would rise out of it. And they're going to have all the answers. They're going to have the answers to COVID. They're going to have the answers to masks and inoculations and all kinds of stuff. And they're going to be the world power. It's hard to make too big a deal about it because the church has been making a huge deal about it since I was too little to know what was going on. They've been saying exactly what I just told you, that the United States was going to become hostage to an authoritarian Europe who was going to call the shots and who was going to issue mandates that were going to violate our religion. If they say, you got to do this, say, it's against my religion. That's what I'm going to tell them. So we're here to be joyful and to celebrate. Well, it's kind of hard to celebrate when our country is being torn asunder and being humiliated all over the world. And we got this we got this gentleman reading his teleprompter, sounding it out phonetically. Now, I know that he can answer a question or two and he can do okay for a little while, but not for long. And I don't even know if he knows what he's saying, when he reads that teleprompter. He mispronounces so many words, it's just hard to be sure. And I'm pretty sure he's not the one coming up with all, I don't want to give anything away, but I'm pretty sure he's not coming up with all the things he's telling us or that he's saying, that he's reading off that teleprompter. I don't want to make in the 1960s when I was going to school, I remember a day when I was in the 6th grade when the girls were all excited and they said, have you heard? We might not flee and the world might not come to an end and we might get to grow up and we might get to get married. We might get to have children. I mean, the girls were having this conversation as they walked in front of me, and I don't know why I wasn't all that worked up about it in the first place, but they took it to heart. And it was a big deal when the church decided that World War III wasn't going to start in 1972 and Christ wasn't going to return in 1975. Wow. Can you imagine? If you'd have told my grandpa that, he'd have put you out of the church. If you'd have told him it's not going to happen, oh, brother, you have now violated church doctrine. Well, that's one of the things that's, where my dad differed from my granddad. And that is, like, some minister doesn't, is not a prophet in the Old Testament. He doesn't have ultimate authority to tell everybody what to do and how to do it and when to do it. It's just the way it is. So we don't do that. We don't lower the boom on people, and our ministers are, they're the nicest bunch of guys, are they not? I mean, does anybody know somebody nicer than Stan Roberts? I mean, what a great guy. Not only is he humble and is he wonderful to listen to and doing such a great job, but he's a great guy to go out to dinner with. And I can't even begin to express how much I appreciate him and all the work that he does, and Dr. Ricks. Now I'm going to tell you a story. Now, it's probably enough time has passed that I can tell this. Right after Dad died, we underwent a takeover attempt. And Dr. Ricks was there, the area coordinators were there, some of whom are deceased, and some of whom are still with us. But they had decided that the board of directors of the church and the Evangelistic Association needed to sign over the presidency to a gentleman. I don't know what his status is. I've heard Alzheimer's, and I've heard that he's not well. I never disliked the man. And I'd just soon not even say his name. George Trent. Man, if my mother was here, I'd get a whipping. I'd for sure get in trouble. So I go to this meeting of the area coordinators, and 2 or 3 of them worked on this paper overnight, and they made copies of it, and they passed it around. And I think Tom Carey, anyway, I think he read it. Mind you, he had delayed his trip. I don't know. He claimed a nosebleed. I don't know. He wasn't there for hours and when he was supposed to be there, and he claimed he'd had a nosebleed along the way. I thought, I'm going to have to use that excuse one of these days when I'm not where I'm supposed to be. But he reads this thing, and that we recommend that the board of directors name Mr. Trent the chairman of the board for the period of 1 year until we can work things out and figure out how things are going to go after Mr. Armstrong's sad death. So I thought, okay, that sounds great. That sounds fine. That'll be all right with me. So I had to go into another meeting with the board of directors. They looked at me and said, "Are you out of your mind? No, we're not doing that. We are not going to do it." So you're prepared to sign your dad's entire life's work over to somebody you barely know? So I guess we ain't doing that. I was between a rock and a hard place. I was mad. I was upset. I didn't know whose side I was on. We sat in there in a stalemate for way, way too long. When it came a little on the door, you know who it was? It was Dr. Ricks. He had a little slip of paper. He had written down several titles that might be acceptable, but they didn't confer the kind of legal power, financial authority, whatever it all amounted to anybody. So what did they name him? Dad would have never accepted that, but we had our backs against the wall. It was superintendent of the field ministry. That's what it was. That's like, that'll keep him out of Tyler, and he can boss everybody around, but he can leave us alone. It'd be the best thing. I thought, that ain't never going to work. That is not going to work. And the board told me, he said, what do we got to lose? We might as well try. So I went back in there, and everybody was so nice about it. Everybody said, well, okay, we'll just name him the superintendent of the field ministry, and that'll be fine. Everybody will go on as before, as you were. Well, that took about a week until these guys started writing letters and blowing up. And you people might have even gotten these packets. They sent out a packet of a bunch of legal documents claiming that my dad was trying to steal the church property. It's like, what are we going to do? Put it in the trunk and drive off with it? How do you steal the church property? My dad didn't have a greedy bone in his body. He had his pickup, his boat, his fishing rods, and his guns, and he was a happy camper. What else is there? Well, anyway. But anyway, I don't know if some of you people got those packets or not. They had a stamp. It said as if it came from us. I think there's something about that, letters as if it came from somebody else, telling you this or that. If you get one of them, don't believe it. Well, I guess enough people didn't believe it, because here we still are 17 years later. And if Dr. Ricks hadn't have knocked on that door, I don't know what might have happened. But it wouldn't have been good, I'll tell you that. Well, it's kind of hard to celebrate when you see people, you see the purported leaders, and I'm not sure there's anything legitimate about it. And I think we'll see. I don't know that anything will ever be done about it, but just for everyone to know that this power structure that's in place is illegitimate. And this gal that hangs her hair to one side and then the other, oh baby. I hadn't jumped through the TV. I have not, but I've thought about it a time or two. Anyway, we're not celebrating where we are right now, because that's just not possible after we've been humiliated before the entire world. And our president is being bad-mouthed, not by, forget us, but what about the British, and what about the French, and what about all the people that we count on? What about, the whole world has watched this ignominious situation, and they can put a brave face on it all they want, but that's a tragedy. That's multiple layers of tragedy. I don't even know, they're worried about getting people out of Kabul and out of Afghanistan. Well, these people, we promised that it's like, who promised who what? Nobody told us about any promises. Well, you told half of Afghanistan, if you cooperate with us, that we're going to bring you to the United States? I don't think so. Oh yeah, our guys were over there making promises like you can't believe. And we were blissfully unaware that all these promises have been made. I read unapproved websites. You can't depend on the mainstream, because they're not going to tell you the truth, not about anything. You wait for them to tell you the truth, and you might as well just go to bed, because they're not going to come up with it. They want to tell you about what the requirements are and what the mandates are and what they're going to do to you if you don't comply. I'm shocked that there's been the level of compliance that there has been. I think it's fear. And I think people have bought the fear. And, who knows? Who knows? And who knows what they'll come up with next? They're not going to give up fear, though. That's the first thing that's worked. They have been stamping their feet about global warming since the early 80s. And I ask you, is it any different now than it was then? They had just barely come off the Ice Age. And, you can go on the internet, I'm sure, and see the Newsweek cover, which I had at one time, and it said, "The Ice Age cometh." So, it's going to be a biblical event. And everything's going to freeze solid, and, we're headed for another Ice Age. Well, I don't know what happened. Nobody bought that, so they switched. Now we're all going to burn up. And they keep pointing to little things, weather events here and there, and glaciers, they melt and they fall into the sea. Well, that happens every year. It has from time immemorial. You can go and you can see it. You can ride a boat and you can say, wow, well, that ain't global warming. That happens every time the sun comes out. I've read that there's like 40% more ice in the Arctic right now than there was last year. Oh, really? So this global warming is just eating us alive, isn't it? We're just coming out of the summer like everybody else, and in Texas, one of the mildest summers anybody can ever remember. But hey, you can't turn on the news without hearing about global warming. They're not doing a newscast and they're leaving that out. So, global warming just never really caught on. They're going to force these battery cars on us. I pulled up beside a Prius the other day, and maybe it wasn't a Prius, it was a Tesla. Sorry, Prius. Anyway, it was a Tesla. I pulled up beside the guy, saw me coming, and he hit the gas. Boom, he took off. It's like, yeah, those double A's really go fast, don't they? You get enough double A's all lined up together, and you can burn some rubber, buddy. But let's just hope you're not going anywhere, because you ain't getting home. I mean, not unless you got lots of time on your hands. I suspect pretty soon they're going to put these charging stations in every gas station, and you just have to figure out what to do for a couple hours. See if they got any place to stay nearby. Anyway, I don't know what to do except ridicule the ridiculous, and there's plenty of it. And I enjoy it. Sorry to tell you, but I do enjoy it, and I hope you do too. We're not here to celebrate and to look forward to what's going to happen on, under man's regime, under man's rule, because you've seen what that gets us. It has not gone well. It has not gone well. My dad could never have foreseen what has happened in the years that have transpired since his passing. I don't know if he could have, I just don't know. I don't know how he would have done it. I don't know how he would have survived some of the years that we've been through, or that we're going through right now. But I know it wouldn't have been safe for him, would it? It's not safe for anybody famous, because they are going to take you down one way or the other. So I'm really enjoying flying below the radar and shooting my mouth off pretty much all the time. People at the office are a little tired of it, but they're still putting up with me after all this time. So we'll be joyful about what's coming, but we're not too joyful about what's going on right now. But we're going to have a good time, and I'm going to have a good time, because I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me for the entire week. Anyway, have a great feast, and we'll find a way to be joyful and to celebrate no matter what's going on around us, because we know how it all turns out.
Isn't it amazing how Mark is looking more and more like his dad? I was sitting over, I couldn't help but notice it. It's just striking. The title of this message is God's Government is Coming. God's government is coming. And we're going to rejoice in a sense, the Feast of Tabernacles is in a figurative sense celebrating the prosperity of God's government coming and the peace and prosperity of God's government coming. Maybe the feast represents a lot of other things, temporariness of human life and getting ready, but I think that's a big one. So we have an obligation or a directive from God to rejoice and celebrate. Just as Mark was saying, to celebrate in spite of the fact that, don't you sense an evil infection going through all the tribes of Israel, Australia, Canada, and especially Washington, D.C. Can't you sense it? You can feel it almost, like an evil infection. And I'll just rattle through this quickly, but most of you know this probably better than most people in the world. You can see it in education. CRT and a bunch of other horrible things. Law and order being undermined in blue cities. And I'm told another major city is getting a district attorney that has said destroying property is a moral imperative. When I say that, I know that sounds unbelievable. I'm not making this up. The lady who's probably going to be in charge of Seattle is saying that. Is it San Francisco where you can steal, if it's less than 1,000, it's okay to shoplift? Shoplifters are wandering with giant backpacks. Well, you might have seen some of the videos. It's total chaos in a lot of blue cities. Drug addiction, the nuclear family under great pressure. And they call it the Afghanistan effect, where our allies believe we're unreliable. By the way, the Germans will back the French because that's in their political advantage. You can clearly see that, I know the church said this years ago that Britain would be out of the EU, and as Mark said, but can you easily see Germany will get what they wanted in 2 world wars? They're now getting it, because you know who's going to be in charge of Europe. It's going to be Britain and and Germany, I mean France and Germany. But who do you think is the strongest between those two? And who's most financially dominant? It's Germany. They don't have to push the issue. Everybody knows it. I mean, it really is true. Germany will be, and I'm not giving, the French will have some part in it too. I'm not taking anything away from France, but if you look at the history of the Holy Roman Empire, and you can see it through the 1500s and all through European history and its ups and downs, basically they became somewhat irrelevant as the power of Britain and America dominated the world ever since the Spanish Armada was sunk. But you know it's coming back. Our allies think we're unreliable, and our enemies, like a shark, smell blood in the water. Matter of fact, that's why Hamas did their rocket attack on Israel. They could sense what we have in the White House. And why the Taliban, you can almost sense the Taliban sensing the weakness. And then they rally to have that surprisingly quick victory in Afghanistan. But one thing to remember, our hero is coming. And if the pride of America's power is setting, things are going down, that means we're getting closer to our real hero coming, Jesus Christ. I remember in 2014, I went through some of my old notes, and the president then went on an apology tour, which undermined the Middle East, and we had the Arab Spring and the Syrian Civil War and all the horrible things in the Middle East. And that was maybe the first stroke in America being seen as an unreliable ally and a red line that didn't really mean anything. And, Trump came along and corrected most of that. But some of the same people who were in that administration are running this administration. And for the second time, things are destabilized. America was the hegemony of the world. Any bad guy, the first thing he had to ask was, what will America do before they did anything bad? Well, they're going to stop asking that question. We probably will have one more screw up in the next 3.5 years. Maybe the third one will be the charm. I don't know what it will be, but you can sense it. The bad guys in the world smell blood in the water. And who knows what will be coming. By the way, if you study world history, you generally have bad things happen when the good countries look weak. Hitler would not have attacked France, except, 1940, May. They look weak. He said, the British and the French won't really fight. Now, maybe he went too far, don't get me wrong, but that's what he thought. But by the way, I know you might have heard this story because I mentioned it before. In the Japanese High Command, their chief admiral had gone to Harvard and been the Navy attaché in Washington. He knew America well. But all the other commanders had been watching Hollywood movies, 1941. I know it's all a joke to us, but they said America, by their standards, looks weak based on Hollywood. And Yamamoto said, no, that's not true. America's a very proud, powerful country. They said, now they look weak, and it looks like our ally, the Germans, are going to take the Russians out without us doing anything. And of course, they always wanted to do Pearl Harbor. That was on their wish list for many years. They thought America was weak. That's why they did Pearl Harbor. We might argue that that was a dumb mistake, obviously, and a lot of others. And at that point, God started doing a lot of things to bless the allies, including America. But the world now sees it. So what should we do? We should rejoice in spite of what we see going on in the world. And by the way, I could be wrong. America may have one more small revival in the future. It's possible that this decline in America will take longer than we think. Because one thing you learn about history, you never know. Like the vast Soviet Empire collapsed in a few months. Who would have thought it? And the great communist Chinese Empire, which survived that collapse barely, but they had a big fight in Beijing, which the outside world doesn't know about. They survived it. China could fall. The communists could fall. America could have a minor revival, or things could go down very, very fast. All I can say is we should pray about it. That's all we can do. I mean, try to be good citizens, vote for the better of the two candidates, all the good citizenship stuff, and be good to our neighbors so our neighbors know, like if they're going to be turning people in the future, like they're ratting people out in Australia. By the way, the communists did a lot of that. Maybe I'll tell you one story, and I'll get to the scriptures. One story. One of my former students had one of the boat people of Vietnam and escaped. She told me this story. She said that her dad had been a pilot flying for the South Vietnamese government. And when the communists took over, they were trying to ferret out anybody that didn't totally support the communist regime. So a family moved in next door to them, were so friendly, and they agreed with everything he said. So charming. And of course, they were put there to rat him out and get a case against their dad. And of course, one day, his dad went to the Gulag. And by the way, her escape from Vietnam it was a great story. I may tell it at another time, her escape and how she almost died by Malaysian pirates, but finally got to America. It's a great story. But the point I want to make is, they assign people to spy on others to rat them out. And by the way, the Nazis and the communists did that in many other places. Be nice to your neighbors so that in the future they won't want to rat you out. Who's keeping this Saturday Sabbath? Well, actually I have some very good neighbors. I'm very blessed. I'll try to be better to them, even better. Anyway, be nice to your neighbors. Let them get to know you as a good, well-rounded, nice person, so they'll be less likely to rat you out in the future. I mean, I can see our government asking people, rat out your neighbors. Are they not going along with whatever stupid thing they want you to go along with? So, the thing I want to make is that the speed of our decline has been maddening up to this point. But I want to go to 1 Corinthians 15:52. This is the good news we should rejoice at. If God's going to bring his kingdom sooner, America will decline faster. I mean that's the potential good news. If if we have more time, then maybe America's decline will be slower. And that could be considered good news too. So it's going to be good news either way, in one contextual sense. So let's rejoice. Our hero is coming. 1 Corinthians 15:52. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trump will sound, and the dead will rise incorruptible, and we shall be changed. Just think about little old you get up in the morning, your elbow aches and your knees ache and your stomach is grumbling. Once that change comes, you'll be like Superman, but no kryptonite. You'll be indestructible. You'll be like this wonderful song you used to love, Forever Young. You'll be forever young. Now my eyes are getting old. Anyway, things start to break down no matter how much you guard your health. Actually, you want to hear a sad story? This doctor they were celebrating a new heart medicine. He said this will keep a lot of people from dying of heart attacks in their late 60s, early 70s. And he said, you know what that means? More people will die of cancer. It's sad, it's true. You live a little longer and something else will get you. Well, once that change comes, we'll have it made. For this incorruptible must put on incorruption. This mortal must put on immortality. So when this corruptible has put on incorruption, and this mortal has put on immortality, then shall be brought past this saying, death is swallowed up in victory. The victory will be ours. The victory will be ours. And it's going to happen. The victory will be ours. 2 Thessalonians 2:2-4. Now, if things go fast, and the Holy Roman Empire and the central of Europe, run mostly by the Germans and French, The Italians and Spanish and Austrians will be in it too, and maybe this time, I even wondered about Switzerland. Will they be caught up in it? Well, but only time will tell. Or part of Russia. By the way, when you think about the Roman Empire, titles like Kaiser and Tsar are just versions of the name Caesar, just put in local languages. And when Caesar made his great triumphal entry as a conqueror in the city of Rome, and everybody, they call it a triumph. And he went around the city parading with all the soldiers and, "Hail Caesar!" Well, we might have a modern version of that. Hail Caesar, the new leader in the world. Well, 2 Thessalonians 2 talks about this new dictator. And he may have charisma, or at least he'll have a vast propaganda machine worldwide, Hollywood probably, or some future European version of it, backing him up. By the way, did you know that Dr. Goebbels, who was a propaganda minister for the Third Reich, they called it Babylon. Babel. I mean, I pronounce it the German way they did it. But they had their own little Hollywood movie area. And they created movies to make a godlike figure out of Adolf Hitler. I think one of their famous movies, the first time they put cameras on roller skates, where the camera was moving. And as Hitler moved down into a parade, the camera was... Now, they do a lot of that stuff now, but they were the first ones to do it. He was like a godlike figure moving up to the podium with all those swastikas, which is a Catholic symbol, by the way, an ancient Catholic symbol. Greater things will be done for this new dictator, backed up by Europe's version of Hollywood, or whatever they call it. If it was done in the past, it'll be done in the future in an even grander style. Anyway, 2 Thessalonians 2:2. Paul says, "Not to be soon shaken in mind or trouble, either by spirit or by word or by letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ had come. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first." Now, I've said this in my local church. You might not have heard it. I think the apostasy of the worldwide Church of God is not the full falling away. I'm not sure what it means, but it's going to be bigger. Bigger. I'm not even sure. But it's going to be so significant, Paul says, you will know it when you see it. Right now, there's still a lot of people in the Western world who have a certain amount of Bible knowledge and belief in the Bible. But the day will come when Bible IQ will be a lot lower. That's why some of the things in the book of Revelation, like standing up and fighting against Christ's return, will be possible because people won't really know the Bible, and this, super pope man, the false prophet that'll be with the future dictator, he will somehow convince people they should worship a man. Now, would you agree, most people, at least in America, know you shouldn't worship any man, right? Now, he might be a good leader, or you might like him, or he's a movie star, and he's handsome, and whatever you like. But you shouldn't worship a man. But they will literally worship a man. And truth as we know it will fall. People will, like Ronald Reagan said, liberals are not ignorant, they're very smart. They know all kinds of things that just aren't true. They're sure they're right, but they're wrong. Well, the world's going to be that way. They're going to know all kinds of things that just are not true. A falling away from truth bigger than what we have seen is yet to come. And when it comes, we're going to say, yeah, that's it. The end is getting closer. Now, many of us will probably pass away before that happens. Do you know that's not a bad thing? I mean, I don't want anyone to suffer when you're passing away. I don't mean it that way. But if you were to die quietly in your sleep one night, missing the end time events of this world is not a bad thing. It's not going to be pleasant to see. Even if we're in places of safety, it's still not going to be a pleasant thing to see. So if you pass away, but you're in Christ, don't fall away first now, because It's how you end the game that counts. If you pass away in Christ, you're most blessed. I know you never think of it that way, do you? You're secure. You're in God's grasp. Like Christ told the Pharisees, he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not the God of the dead. Meaning those guys they're just asleep. He's going to resurrect them. That was proof of the resurrection. They're coming back. So the man and the super pope are going to really change things. Things are going to go down fast. Reading on, the son of perdition who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped. In other words, this guy is much, much higher than God, and the world is going to eat it up. I even think even countries like China, Japan, and other parts of the world that maybe don't fit into the Western world as we think of it, they may not fully go for the religion, but they will cooperate with the leadership of this guy to some extent, and later they're going to have some problems, but the whole world will be buying this. Isn't that amazing? The whole world exalts that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And all that will happen. I said that maybe Netanyahu and Trump would help at least start the building of the third temple. Maybe that won't happen, but maybe it might. You just never know, right? Trump's a builder, and Netanyahu had that on one of his wish lists. So it still might happen. But I guarantee you one thing. The third temple will be built. How do I know that? Because Christ said, when that is desecrated, that is one of the triggers that triggers the end time. And everything Christ says will come true. Like Mark said, the church knew years ago that Britain would not be part of the common market. How do we know that? Because of our understanding of who they were and Bible prophecy. And back then, Britain thought they would be the leader of the European Union. Needless to say, we knew better, but, if you ask somebody back, the European Union got stronger and stronger in the 1990s and whatever, they wouldn't have believed us. That's everything that the Bible says will come true. By the way, I think the new Prime Minister of Israel may screw up too. Not as bad as our leadership, but I saw this on the internet 2 days ago or 3 days ago. Back channels, this is back channels, of course, because they don't have diplomatic relations. Saudi Arabia is trying to buy the Iron Dome missile defense from Israel. Did you know our American government took America's missile defense away from Saudi Arabia, and our new administration is going to sell them a bunch of high-tech Raptor jets? We're not going to do that now. We're against Saudi Arabia and more pro-Iran. Don't ask me for the logic in that. It makes no sense. At the same time, we're begging Saudi Arabia to pump more oil because we shut off our own oil. We're permanently closing wells. It can never be reopened. I guess the policy is keep the oil in the ground, which makes us poor. You're going to ask me, what's the logic? We're still using oil. We're just using somebody else's oil and losing money, but that's what we've got, leadership. Well, here's my fear. If that goes through, and it's an if, nobody knows, they might even do it secretly. Right now, Saudi Arabia is quietly behind the scenes on the same side as Israel because they both fear Iran. Iran has shot a bunch of missiles into Saudi Arabia, and the Houthi rebels on the other side of Saudi Arabia are also shooting missiles in. So they need missile defense, and America's taking it away. But do you see the danger? I mean, just think about it. What if 4 years from now, Middle East changes, and Saudi Arabia is now against Israel, but they have the Iron Dome technology? By the way, don't underestimate how smart Middle East people are. One of my last summer classes I had, all the class were Arabs except for 2 American students. We're all Arabs. So they're very smart kids, and they like me. Anyway, whatever. But the point I'm making is, if they get the Iron Dome technology, couldn't they tweak it, improve it, and also find out the weaknesses of it and give it to Hamas or all those other terrorists? Now think about it. Now you're going to say, oh, they'll probably figure it out anyway someday. Yeah, but selling it to Saudi Arabia, we think this Benny Gantz guy is sharp. That could be a fatal mistake. And one of the theories the church has proposed, and I believe it, is that Israel will suffer some kind of calamity. Then they'll turn to God and build the third temple. They're not going to do it in good times because they love God. God has got to kick them, my expression, to get them to do what they should do. You all don't doubt that, do you? Anybody doubt that that's true? By the way, do any of you think it's possible? You can just raise your hand if you think it's that maybe Netanyahu and Trump will build the third temple. There are a few hands going up. By the way, I'm not saying that will happen. Only time will tell. Just something to think about as the future goes on. And we can watch and see if behind channels they do sell the Iron Dome defense technology to Saudi Arabia. Going on in 2 Thessalonians 2, 7 and 8. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he's taken out of the way. Now, the way to take that scripture is God has put some kind of spiritual block on Satan. He cannot deploy his full evil demonic plan and demons on the world until God removes that block. And maybe it's stopping certain demons, but it's a spiritual thing. But it is going to happen someday. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy. So God's going to get, he and the false prophet get thrown in the lake of fire and destroyed forever. And the question is, why will God do that? Why will God at some point unleash or allow, like controlling a pit bull on a leash? Why will God, let him loose on the world? Verse 9 and 10, 2 Thessalonians. Here is at least part of the why. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all signs, powers, and lying wonders, with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth. They do not receive the love of the truth. And I get the impression, as you listen to the media and others, they don't want the truth. They want to only hear what they want to hear. Not only about, political issues and biblical issues and moral issues. Like one lady, I think it was Alaskan Airlines. I saw the story on, I think it's Fox News. It might have been someplace else, but they had some kind of internet workshop where they will ask people to post thoughts about issues going on in the world, and I don't remember all the details. But one airline stewardess, who appears a Christian, said, well, what's the moral aspect of all this? That's all she said. That set off a firestorm on Twitter. She was fired from being an airline stewardess, probably will never work again with any other airline, just by mentioning the word morals. She didn't say anything about is transgender moral or immoral. She didn't say, she just brought up the question, what's the moral aspect of this? You can't ask that question in public anymore. Think about it. The word morality is evil. If you had asked me this 15 years ago, I wouldn't have believed it. But I didn't make that story up. That's a true story. She got fired for just mentioning the word. What's the moral aspect of all these things? They don't tolerate that. They don't want the truth. People do not value truth. Here's a story. Mrs. Doofus always wanted to have a family and wanted to get pregnant, and she couldn't. And one day she invited her friend over, and she was jumping up and down. She was so happy Her friend says, "Did you get pregnant?" "Yes, I got pregnant." And they were all celebrating. She said, "And I got even better news. You just got the test for pregnancy. What better news can you have?" "I'm going to have twins." She said, "Well, how could you know that? You just got the test." "Yeah, I went to Sam's Club and I bought a twin pack." A twin pack pregnancy test. And they both came back positive. Some of you aren't laughing, you didn't get it. Okay, well, as a former fraternity brother of Bill Cosby, by the way, he got exonerated. He said he could have gotten out of prison early if he had pleaded guilty, but he didn't. They overturned his conviction. It was illegal. Anyway, you all knew that. It was political. By the way, you know the thing that got Bill Cosby in trouble? I'm not saying he was innocent of not having affairs. A lot of movie stars had affairs. Women pursued them, but you don't even want to hear all that. You probably know it. So I'm not saying he's an angel. Believe me, I have no such illusions about any Hollywood stars. But I remember it was in the 1990s, and I don't remember all the exact dates because some of my relatives went to see him when he made an appearance in a major city. He was talking about how our people need to get back to family values, and he emphasized family values and said, you parents better get control of your kids before they're 17 and 18, before the police go looking for them. Now, that's perfect advice. Do you know that he got threats from Hollywood saying, "You better shut up or we'll get you"? And they got him. Well, he maybe eventually got exonerated, but they got him for a while. Can you imagine that level of evil, that you don't want people to even hear from a person with some status like Bill that family values are good for society and tough child rearing is good for kids? I mean, when I even think about it, that level of evil kind of shocks me. But that's what exists in much of the establishment in Hollywood. And it's been around for a while. It's just been kind of under the cover. Anyway, that's the world we live in. People don't want the truth. They don't want morality. They don't want right and wrong. Just like Isaiah said, they call hot cold and sweet bitter. Down is up and up is down. They're doing things to help criminals and punish good people. What's going on? That's what's going on. That's why God's going to unleash it, because the world does not want truth. God is letting mankind learn bitter lessons. Now, this will eventually be advantageous to mankind. In the great white throne judgment, when all these people are resurrected, God will say, "Look, mankind got to have his own way." All the details. And they'll be able to review their life and say, "You're right. That didn't work, did it? That didn't work, did it?" And he says, and what did work, you saw in the millennium under Christ's rule, is the laws of God and the ways of God, done right and balanced, of course. And they'll compare the history of the millennial reign of Christ with the 6,000 years under man's rulership. It'll be like night and day. It'll help people really repent more deeply. And the world's going to be mad at the two witnesses. Now, I want to go to Revelation 11:9, because the two witnesses will be able to tell the world the truth, and they won't be able to stop them because they'll have the power Elijah had. Like one of the kings of Israel was mad at Elijah, and he sent some soldiers to arrest him. And Elijah said, "Well, if I am a man of God, let fire come down." 50 soldiers burned like crisp bacon. Well, you know the story. Well, they'll have that kind of power, so they won't be able to stop these guys from telling the truth, and it'll irritate them. Revelation 11:9. Then those from the peoples, tribes, tongues, and nations will see their dead bodies 3.5 days, because finally the beast will be able to kill them and not allow their dead bodies to be put into the graves. And those who dwell on the earth, this is a vast majority, will rejoice. Those two witnesses who kept irritating us with the truth will be dead over them. Now, if they knew the Bible, they'd realize this is actually predicting the Bible. This is bad news, but they don't know the Bible, most of them. Over them. Make merry, send gifts to one another, because the two prophets tormented those who dwell on the earth. They're rejoicing so much because the truth they don't want. People do not want the truth. Matthew 24:21. Matthew 24:21. For then there will be great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. This World War III is going to be. If you think World War II and World War I was bad, this will be even worse. Unless those days were shortened, no flesh will be saved, but for the elect's sake. Now, I was thinking about biological warfare. You know, the big, at least there may be radiation warfare, some new weapons that can be done by satellite, but we don't know for sure about those. But the things we do know, they have biological, most major powers have biological weapons, chemical weapons, and nuclear weapons. Well, we've seen the power of biological weapons. Let's say there is reasonable evidence, and I believe it, that COVID was engineered in a lab. So that a virus which only affected animals, bats and mice and rats, now affect people. It's been engineered. Let's say some country in the future says, let's do a sneak biological attack on our enemy. But what we'll do is we'll engineer this virus so they won't even know what's going on until it's too late. We'll engineer it to only kill certain people or certain types or certain age groups, maybe the warrior age group, whatever. But we'll also have special vaccines in case something goes wrong for our people, and you know. But like anything else man tries, it'll get out of control. It's like, if it's true that Fauci at least helped engineer the beginnings of this gain of function, to take a virus that's relatively not so bad and turn it into a Frankenstein monster, but it was only going to be in a lab. It's like every science fiction story you've ever read, the monster escapes, like Jurassic Park. You know, they got all these gigantic dinosaurs behind electric fences. Oh, we got these fences, they can't get out. Well, you know the story. They always get out and they always eat everybody. Well, in other words, when the world starts using biological weapons, it will get out of control. And the other side will respond with their version. And, well, you think that through and you can see how they would poison the world. And viruses get in the air and they're everywhere. And hope not to shock you all, but viruses are so, actually you could even, I was in a biology class, we even argued whether viruses were really alive or not. Because they're not one-cell animals, they're smaller than a one-cell animal. They're a let me say this accurately. I can't think of the exact word, but they're a sub one-cell animal. They're smaller than every cell in your body and every germ and every bacteria. And what they do is they infect if they have the right coating. It's like a lock. If they can get, your body of course has enzymes that block it, but if they can get the right lock to enter your cell, they go in there and they mess up the mechanism that runs your cell, and it produces more viruses and kills the cell, and the whole thing spreads and it causes diseases. And in the animal world, what viruses do, they're like predators. They get rid of the weak and the sick. Because, a virus wouldn't want to kill everybody, it wipe itself out. So the weak and the sick die off and the rest of the herd gets stronger. Well, when mankind starts playing around with that sort of thing, they won't be able to control it. It'll get out of control, right? Just like I'm sure Fauci and the boys thought their gain of function research, it would stay in the Wuhan lab, right? It didn't. So we can see the power. Why does Christ have to come back? They would poison this planet. And as I said, they may even have weapons we don't even know about yet. Like, beams of power from outer space from satellites. But I'm sure we'll find out. And you know that the dictatorship in Europe will be backed up by vast propaganda. They'll make Dr. Goebbels' propaganda machine or the Soviet Union propaganda machine. By the way, Pravda means truth in Russian. And the Russian people eventually learned it was the exact opposite. Whatever the government told you. By the way, the German people learned that too. Near the end of the war, they got propaganda. All their cities were being bombed. Everything was going bad, and the propaganda machine was saying, we got secret weapons. We're going to turn the tide. We're going to win the war. The German people realized, no. We've heard Dr. Goebbels for years, but they learned whatever they say, the opposite is probably true. They didn't even tell them about Stalingrad for a long time, what a disaster it was. That winter offensive the Russians pushed. By the way, the Japanese didn't tell many of their officials and their people about Midway for a long time. They couldn't believe they lost at Midway. I mean, that was a miraculous, well, maybe that's another discussion, but I think God blessed America greatly. But what I'm saying is a vast propaganda machine is going to come to support the beast and the false prophet. We're seeing a little version of that in our modern media. As Mark said, you can, and even local news, they get things off Associated Press. They're all part of the same system. The first thing they do is, how will this help our political movement? Then they decide whether they're going to say anything about it or not. Or they're going to twist it and spin it. And so truth is out the window. 1 Thessalonians 5:1. For you, but this feast represents victory for the truth. Victory for the truth. It's coming in the near future. 1 Thessalonians 5. For you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. But when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction. There will be some lulls when it will look like the beast and the false prophet have created world unity, world security, world prosperity. There'll be a lot of secret labor camps they won't tell you about, but it'll look really good. And then suddenly things will fall apart. But we have to be spiritually ready. Many of the prophecies in the Bible indicate you can't wait until everything starts falling apart. Then I'll go back to God. We have to stay with God. We have to stay with Christ during the relatively peaceful times. Because when it does happen, remember Japan was having peace talks in D.C. when their fleet was on its way to bomb Pearl Harbor. So and they were calling the war in Europe the phony war. When things look peaceful, they could change. And with modern technology, I would say if you wanted to have a sneak attack, you'd first put an internet worm to mess up communications, mess up their missile defense, and then launch missiles, and the war could be won or lost in a few days. Just mop up. Anyway, I don't predict that, but it's certainly possible. You can't wait until things fall apart. We need to pray for America, pray for God's church, pray for our fellow brethren. I believe God will answer our prayers for other people more than he'll answer our prayers for ourselves. But pray for yourself too, of course. We should be aware of the danger for the evil dictatorships that are out there. And it says in 1 Thessalonians 5, therefore let us not sleep as others do. Don't say, well, I'm just going to binge watch Netflix. Not that I'm against watching TV, I don't mean it that way. But binge watch Netflix, eat a whole bunch of junk food, relax. As Satan would say, have another piece of candy and relax. Don't worry about all that. You want to try to be godly stuff, just relax and go with the flow, whatever the flow is. Don't fall asleep spiritually. We need to celebrate, like this feast is, the coming of Jesus Christ. Also, near the end, Christ predicts the love of many will fade. One thing you don't want to be, you don't want to be the betrayer. You don't want to be the one who rats out your fellow Christians to get extra favors from the establishment. That's what they did in Vietnam, and they've done it in East Germany, a lot of places. They'll have a little credit card with, social scores and things that'll let you do certain things and money. Well, if you can find a couple people to rat out, we'll up your score, give you more goodies. You can go to this or that. The last thing you want to do is be a Judas. That's the last thing you want to do. 1 Corinthians 13:12. We now see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know, just as I am known. We need to try to learn to love God. Just as that sign says over there, you want to love God with your heart, your soul, and your mind. And the laws of God help you, of course. And as you know from the book of Hebrews, chapter 8, the new covenant is writing the laws in our hearts and in our mind. And as Peter says, you want to partake of the divine nature. Learn to love God. That's the battle. And as it says, and now faith, hope, and love, these three. But the greatest of these is love. And if love starts to die in this world, and love isn't sex, by the way, we should try to get more of that agape love. And as families start to break up, I was telling my grandkids this. I said, remember, I mentioned our family name. I said, no matter what happens in the future, you all take care of each other. I put them off against each other. I said, if so-and-so loses a job and is about to be homeless, you take him in and put him in your house. And they all joke, yeah, I'll give him a cot in my basement or in my barn or something. They joke with each other. But I said, really, when I was young, our extended family took care of each other. I could tell you stories, but you probably don't want to hear it. But now there's less of that. You know that there was one lady being interviewed. Her brother was on the streets of San Francisco, out of his mind with drugs and whatever. She said, well, I let him live on the streets. I'm not going to take him in. Is that what's happening to America? Families should take care of each other. And they're not, at least in many cases, they're not doing that like they should. 1 John 3:2. Remember, we have a chance to be in God's family. That's wonderful. Beloved, now are we the children of God. It has not yet been revealed what we shall be. But we know that when we see him, we'll look at him face to face. We shall be like him. You know, it says in 2 Thessalonians that God lives in unapproachable light. In other words, you can get close to looking at God face to face. You just melt. Even Moses could only see the back of God for a fleeting moment with special protection. But we will be in God's family. Wow, think about that. All we have to do is hang on. And even if you have weaknesses that give you trouble, just keep repenting. Keep repenting. Don't give up. Keep repenting. Keep trying. Stay with God. Keep praying. If you're able to, go to church on the Sabbath, if you have a church anywhere near you. 1 Corinthians 2:9. But as it is written, eye has not seen, nor ear heard, nor is it entered the heart of man, the things which God has for us. It's greater than your imagination. You know, Paul said, being in God's kingdom can't even be compared to what you may have to give up in this life. I know that's kind of hard to believe, but remember, Paul actually got to go to heaven in vision. A lot of things he says, I can't even tell you now. You'll see that in 2 Corinthians 12. But what God has for us is so great, we can't even imagine it. We just have to hang in there. We have to stay strong. And I just want to end this thing by saying, pray for America. Pray for the church. And before we do the last song, I'd like to ask Mr. Carl Hill to come forward to do the offertory, because I may forget that. Those things, it's happened more than once. What do you mean you forgot to call on me? So, and say, come, Lord Jesus, come.